Hey, friends, quick heads up for all the mental health pros out there. Ever thought about making more money without adding more client hours? Well, if so, I've got something really cool for you. I've whipped up a list of 50 smart ideas to boost your income, all tailored for therapists and counselors just like us. Think online courses, digital tools, or even your own wellness product. And guess what? It is totally free. So if you want in, just click the link in the show notes. It's super easy to sign up, and you'll be browsing through those ideas in no time, thinking about all the possibilities. So don't miss out. Click the link in the show notes now, grab that list, and let's shake things up in your practice and your bank account. All right, here's this week's episode. Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, we dive deep into the transformative world of the break method with its founder, Bizzie Gold. Bizzie shares the inception, evolution, and the unique approach of the break method to mental health and personal development. Unlike anything in the mental health field, the break method offers a data analytics approach to understanding and changing deep-seated patterns, promising a quantum leap in the way we address mental wellness. During our conversation, Bizzie explains how the break method works, its foundation on identifying and altering brain patterns developed in early childhood, and its success in creating sustainable change in individuals' lives. This method is not just about temporary fixes, but about fundamentally altering how individuals perceive and react to their world, ensuring lasting transformation. For therapists, practitioners, and anyone interested in pioneering mental health solutions, this episode is a must listen. Bizzie also shares insights into the training and certification process for professionals interested in incorporating the break method into their practice, highlighting the structured, efficient, and effective nature of this approach. And here is the best part. As a special offer for our listeners, you can get 30% off the break method training program. This is an incredible opportunity to be at the forefront of mental health practice, equipped with tools and knowledge that promise real sustainable change for your clients. To get the discount, apply the code Lisa Podcast. That's all one word, Lisa Podcast at checkout. Just click the link in the show notes to learn more about the break method and to get the discount. So don't miss this chance to learn about the future of mental health from one of the most innovative leaders in the field. Tune in to discover how the break method is setting a new standard for therapeutic success and how you can be a part of this revolutionary change. Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and I'm super excited to welcome Bizzie Gold to the podcast. Welcome. It is so awesome to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm so curious, and I have so many questions for you about what it is that you do, your method, how you're helping people transform their lives. So you do a lot of different things. I think the last Instagram post, you have 5 businesses. Is that right?
8.
8, sorry. 8. So that's probably a whole other podcast episode on how you manage all of those things. But can you just give my listeners a little bit of a background of, who you are, what you do, and how you help?
The primary thing that I'm focused on these days is Break Method. I founded Break Method in 2014, and at the time, I was running 2 very large global brands that were not even slightly involved in what I was working on in Break Method. So I had to slowly, methodically find a way for me to sell off my majority shares in those companies so that I could go all in on Break Method. I did that in 2019, and it just so happens that in February of this year, I got all of those companies back, which is a blessing. I was able to spend all those years focusing 100% on Break Method, which is what I wanted to do, and focus on, being a mom. And I was just given everything back. So now I happen to have everything, though my personal interests professionally are 100% focused on Break Method. So the other companies that I've founded are purely just because I have more of a visionary gift. If I see something that feels broken in a business sector or in the world at large, my brain just envisions solutions. And because I have business savvy, I've been able to create solutions that turn into global brands for most of those visions. So,
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. I have a similar gift. Unfortunately, my businesses probably are not at the level of yours, but it's something to aspire to. And you are super inspiring. And I just absolutely love what it is that you're doing. What you just said, like you see a problem and your brain goes to, how can we fix this? How can we make a difference?
mhm.
So, what is the break method and how does it help people?
The break method is a data analytics approach to mental health. Over the last few years, we've been working with a data analytics firm to actually comb through all of our thousands of client records and essentially show that the proof is in the pudding of the results. I've been working on it, as I said, since 2014, and I think my brain has naturally been adept at pattern recognition my whole life. I believe it's a trauma response. So I don't know your thoughts on that. I think there's certain brain pattern types that have to become good at pattern recognition to keep themselves safe, and that was certainly the case for me. So my whole life, I've always been able to watch behavior, sort behavior, understand motivation at a level that I think the average person either doesn't want to do or doesn't know how to do. I think it's probably a little bit of both. And over time, working with clients, I started to observe trends and I categorized those trends. And then one day I found myself very clear that I had stumbled upon a process that helps us establish brain pattern types that can be distilled down from all of humanity down to 5 brain pattern types. And we can accurately assess these brain pattern types in one session by tracking certain data input output relationships. So I had done this on my own and I had trained obviously all of our interns and people coming through the program. And it was only in the last about 2 years that we were able to take that step and say, hey, data analytics firm, this is everything we think we're seeing. This is what has been working for us for all these years.
Mhm.
Let's see what are all the computers say about the data that we're giving you. And what ended up happening is I was sitting across from a team of about 11 people that took months pouring through everything. And they said, I don't know how you did this, but this is the future of mental health. So when we look at the landscape of where we are today, I think we've been led to believe that somehow telehealth is the savior. If people just have more access to mental health, then people get better. But this has not actually been true at all for a variety of reasons. Obviously, access can be great, but what if the access is something that is not high quality, right? Then you've
Right.
given access to something that will arguably make a person worse. It's our belief in break method that many of the approaches that are inherent to traditional talk therapy can make a problem worse because you tend to be talking over long periods of time with narrative-based responses and you end up looping and in many cases reaffirming through the label that you're given your symptoms. So you actually start to identify with your symptoms more and more because you're doing that repetitively. So break method is very focused on separating you from your symptoms, separating you from your patterns so that you can understand how your pattern masquerades as you, but it's actually not you at all. Even so much as people think that their personalities are 100% them, right? This is just who I am. Take it or leave it, right? My family's just Italian. My family's just Jewish. We don't realize in our culture that personality is a byproduct of brain pattern. We don't just, that's not just authentically who we are, it's how we have coped and handled our environment up to this point, but we're fully capable of change. And I do think that that's the landscape where we come into today in break method, which is, I think, as you know, the therapy space has pushed more and more toward more affirmational models, like you are what you say you are, and I will keep feeding into that in a variety of spaces, right? If you say that you have all these depression symptoms, I'm essentially going to give you a label and then you're going to keep that loop going and that will be your story. I have depression, I have severe anxiety, and you will essentially just keep looking for evidence in your environment to prove the truth of that. We do the exact opposite. So once we actually help in that first session the client arrive at their brain pattern type, we spend the next 4 months seeking ways to try to poke, prod, and break it to make sure that by the time we're applying rewiring strategy, we're 100% conclusive of your pattern. So I do think that in many therapy spaces, and I think this comes back to the earliest origins of the therapy model that most are built on today. There's a whether you like it or not, and I don't mean this to be offensive. I spend most of my career now working with therapists and training them. So this is not to speak down on therapists as individuals, but I think many therapists are starting to realize that there's a fundamental breakdown in the system that they're operating in, right? And it's not something to take personal offense to, but my hope is, and through all the therapists I've been working with, I can see that there are some who are starting to ask questions like, why are we doing this? This doesn't really make any sense. So in many therapy containers, there can be a process by which, and I'll highlight that I see this the most in clients that I bring on that were previously working in marriage counseling, where once the therapist thinks they see something, instead of trying to prove themselves wrong, they're trying to prove themselves right. So it's like once they think they see something, in many cases, they can't unsee it, and then they end up altering that client's course of therapy from that vantage point, and they can't really get out of it. With break method, our entire process is extremely structured, and you can't ever break out of the structure itself. And what's most important is the client's preference can't dictate where you go or don't go. When the client's preference, oh, I don't want to talk about that, or I'm not ready to talk about that, or that triggers me, you can't be effective with your treatment, right? Because the brain pattern is going to have a whole subset of preferences, and those preferences are actually meant to prevent you from healing. The preferences keep you from exposing yourself to that which you don't want to do or that which is triggering. Our belief in break method is you cannot heal from a trigger you refuse to be exposed to. So the structure serves many functions, but one of the structure functions is that it prevents client self-deception. So throughout the process, a client doesn't understand how or why we're using certain information, which actually diffuses their ability to lie. If you're asking a client a question and they understand how you're going to take that information and potentially tie it to other things that you're working on, they're much more likely to lie on purpose or lie unintentionally. The way we extract data in break method completely prevents this process. So they'll go through a series of data extraction processes, and then about 2 to 3 videos later, they're taught how to go back and retroactively look at the data, assimilate the pattern. And we've found that this process, even in severe cases of borderline personality, help the client see the error in their thinking. So because of the way we've extracted the information and put it on the page, it's just enough separated from self that when they go back and observe it, they have a different vantage point and they can actually see, okay, I can no longer self-deceive. There's clearly a truth emerging here that I can't run from. And in break method, we're there to help them pick up the pieces, face the reality. We call this moment in break method reality vertigo, when all of a sudden you get a few pieces of information that once they click, and you can't run from them, and they caught you off guard, right? Because of this inability to control the process, they blindside you. We're not blindsided. We know exactly when it's going to happen, but to some extent, it blindsides the client on purpose. And they have to find a way to fit those pieces in and then retroactively reflect on their entire lives. Because if these pieces are true, then X, Y, Z is also true. That moment can be very jarring for people. And our team obviously is well trained to help people get through those moments, because they will happen, and it should be part of the healing process. You look like you've got some questions, so I can keep going
No,
forever.
I mean,
You
I'm just
jump in
like,
and go for it.
I'm nodding my head. That whole, you call it reality vertigo. I mean, that makes so much sense to me. I mean, I've had those moments in my life too, where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I'm getting this feedback. I may not like it, but I can't avoid the truth at this point. So those are life defining moments, and you make that decision moving, how do I want to be moving forward? It's all here. What do I want to do this information? And if you don't have the right support or guide or, you know, uh, therapist to help you, it can be really, really challenging and really hard. No, I'm just nodding my head because I'm like, I love it. I mean, I love it's data driven. I love that You have a protocol that you go through. And I guess my question is like, what kind of, do you ever get resistance from clients? Do you call them clients, first of all? Do you call,
We do call them
okay.
clients. And at this point, I would say it's about 70-30. 70% of the people that are leading break method are therapists or
Mhm.
social workers. And then the other are people that are just trained in the methodology.
Gotcha.
So we do call them clients globally. And I think here's why we don't get resistance. And I like to use the analogy of going on a roller coaster. So, do you a roller coaster person?
I used to be. I
Okay.
remember the feeling.
So, historically, throughout my early childhood, I was really claustrophobic and I didn't like the feeling of things being clicked on over my neck.
Mhm.
So, I love the feeling of being on a roller coaster, but I don't like that feeling of being committed where it clicks down and you're like, oh, even if I wanted to get out of here, I can't get out of here, right? So, leaning on that analogy, committing to break method is like allowing yourself to get strapped on a roller coaster that you know is going to be wild and crazy, but eventually it's going to land you back in a place where you are a forever changed person. And the hardest part is getting yourself to click on the harness.
Sure. Okay.
We on our team, I think, do a great job of preparing people to click on the harness so that once they've clicked on the harness, the rest is something we called controlled surrender. Like I could push back against this, but I'm not going to because I see the value and I feel supported and I knew this was going to happen. So we don't lie to our clients and say, "Oh, it's going to be easy. A couple weeks you should be all healed." Right? Like we're very honest and upfront about what the process is going to entail. And I do even go so far as to explain to clients that the way the process and structure works in break is that you're essentially agreeing to become a rat in a maze.
Mhm.
And we're going to be changing out the proverbial cheese, and you're going to get pissed, and you're going to get triggered, and you're going to have to face all of your blind spots. There's no way to get out of it, but though that is actually what holds the key to you being healed forever. If we don't effectively find all those blind spots, but more importantly, figure out how they're all ultimately generated from your brain pattern, right? So we have like a very top-down approach. Once we determine the brain pattern with 98.3% accuracy, we can predict all of that person's behavior, preferences, choices to a place that scares clients. Because on the first session, they're like, how on earth could you know that much about me? I was in therapy for 10 years. This is the most I've gotten out of a session ever. Even when I work with therapists who go through the initial stages of our process, they're floored. Like,
Mhm.
why doesn't this exist? How come we didn't know about this?
Yeah.
And even therapists who, arguably you've been, as a therapist, I would imagine you're processing parts of your life in a different way since you became a therapist. You can't help but look inward
Mhm.
when you're learning things. So for therapists to tell me on that first session, that first bit of data extraction, I don't even know how I got to this information, but this is so profound. This is crazy. It just shows the not just efficacy, but the efficiency of what we do. Break method is built for effectiveness, of course, right? We want it to be effective. There's no point in doing something that's not going to work. So we are a results-oriented practice, which in the therapy space is not necessarily the status quo, right? It's a much more intangible, you're in it as long as you're in it, and I can't tell you exactly when you're going to heal. And what we've found is quite the opposite is true. Once we know that person's brain pattern type, we can even tell you how long it's going to take that person to come out of it because
Mhm.
there are certain brain pattern types that are significantly more stubborn than others, right? And then there are some others that as soon as they see the error, their brain immediately accepts the information and says, oh, well, I don't want to waste any time here. Now I know, so I'm
Mhm.
not going to keep doing that to myself anymore.
Right.
The people that struggle are the people that want to fight with that new truth and potentially still want to feel victimized by that truth, right? So an
Right.
example would be potentially more that borderline
Mm.
personality type. I've seen that particular client pattern multiple times where even when they get to so I'll watch them change throughout the process. And then when they get to the end, there's a process in the final strategy session where we're reviewing all of our work that is always collaborative. It's never me writing all this stuff about the client, right? Everything is always, let's extract the data through our diagnostic sessions, then let's learn how to organize the data, then we move on to the next. So there's never a part where it's me just talking at the client and telling them what I think. It's always collaborative. So that client, even though they've changed, even though they've had all this evidence that things are working, there have been times where I've seen them get triggered by the truth that is on that final document and will start to take it personally. And when you point out to that person, hey, do you remember on, session 4 when we worked through this together and you said this and I said this? I'll be like, I don't think I said that. Okay, do you want the recording of the session? Right? And this is where break, again, it's beneficial to have the recordings of the sessions, because for a client like that, they might genuinely need to go get slapped in the face with, God, I did say that. My brain doesn't want to accept this information as truth. So it's easier for me to deflect or project onto the person that's trying to help me than it is for me to actually put this somewhere deep where I can use it. And often when they go back and they watch that recording, they're the ones coming back and be like, okay, God, I got so triggered there. It felt so real, but I can see that I'm the one that said that. And this is the truth. It scares me. Like, okay, great. We can work with that.
I want to share with you a fabulous offer from Therapy Notes. Have you ever felt swamped by endless paperwork and tangled schedules? Then step into a world of clarity with Therapy Notes. Hailed as the gold standard in electronic health records, Therapy Notes is your beacon in the dynamic realm of mental health care. With their round the clock 7-day live phone support, it's evident why they shine with a dazzling 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and Google. From effortless billing to streamlined scheduling, precise note taking, and state of the art telehealth, Therapy Notes is your all in one solution. And for the prescribers out there, they're ecstatic to introduce ePrescribe. And if you're switching lanes from another EHR, they've got your back. They will seamlessly migrate your demographic data at zero cost, ensuring you hit the ground running. So become part of the 100,000 plus mental health professionals community who've chosen Therapy Notes. And to embark on a 2-month complimentary journey, just tap the link in the show notes or use promo code Lisa at checkout at therapynotes.com. That's promo code Lisa, Lisa, at checkout at therapynotes.com. So dive into the Therapy Notes experience today and see why it's the talk of the town. Navigate with confidence and choose the best. Right.
So no, that, the resistant client, I would say, is predominantly that type, that pattern type. And obviously that's one out of 4, and it's not the most common of all the patterns by far. But that's really the only resistance we have. Otherwise, it can be challenging to get people to click on the harness. But once they're on the harness in break method, even after the first session, you're seeing the world differently and you feel seen and understood, often for the first time. So we get compliance because of that. One of the things that, and it's perfectly timed that we're about to go in, I actually start leading our therapy training tomorrow. And one of the things we talk about is how we build rapport differently in break method. So in a more traditional talk therapy container, the rapport building process can take time. How long would you say that rapport building typically takes with your client?
I mean, it could take anywhere from 15 minutes to 7 sessions. It just depends. It just depends on the client and their personality and, where they are and how ready they are. So, yeah.
Right. So again, it depends on their preference, right? It depends on how much they want to be forthcoming with information or participate.
Right.
Or how truthful they want to be. Because I think you probably run into having a client that seems really open and you realize on session 8 that they were open about something that was not true.
Right.
You're like, oh, okay, well,
right.
Yeah. Glad we wasted 3 sessions talking about things that are not true at all.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, I haven't. Well, I do want to add in that I don't know if I mentioned this in my email, but I'm working on my hypnotherapy certification. And one of the things I love about the model that I'm using is like we get right to it. We go right into it. But I think part of the reason I love it so much is because I know we got to get there. If we're gonna have change in your life, we got to get there sooner than later. We can't. I don't want to waste your time or my time because we can do this a lot quicker. But I also want to say, I think because I have been a therapist for many years, it's easier for me to do that. So if I was brand new or I was coming at this from a different profession, what you're sharing right now would be super beneficial for anybody who wants to get into this work. Let's not waste time. So
Mm.
so you're teaching people how to do that really quickly. So I think that's great.
So
Love that.
we build rapport using different metrics.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
When we're starting to go through the initial diagnostic assessment, typically there's an arc between essentially question 20 and 25 where anyone that's trained in break method will already be able to reflect back predictive information to the client that makes them feel completely understood. Well, how could you know that about the few questions that I've just answered? Because these questions are much more quantitative. They're not heady narrative subjective. But how did that make you feel? None of those questions are being asked. So when the client is already starting to see that there's accuracy on the table, how could you be that accurate in 10 minutes? Then you've got their attention. And if you hold your authority well in the interview process, you're also actually building rapport. If there's no dead space and there's no awkwardness and there's nothing that they answer that makes you falter, you're holding your authority well, and that client is going to start to settle into the process.
Mm-hmm.
When questions are open-ended and there isn't a set structure or process you have to follow, there are plenty of people that could even be wonderful therapists that are just having a bad day, or maybe they're stressed out, and the cadence of your speech isn't quite on target, and that alone could be the factor in how comfortable a client feels. So break method also removes that part of it, where the cadence and the interview structure, especially of diagnostic session 1, is completely set. So the therapist is obviously trained in how to interpret the data to actually give them their pattern hypothesis, but the process itself is extremely structured and you can't deviate from the structure. You can't even deviate from the interview format itself. So that accuracy, that authority piece, and then again at the end, the honesty. This isn't going to be easy. There are plenty of times that you will not like me, and that is okay with me. That I think should always be a part of some of the therapy process. And unfortunately, I think many of the therapists that I've worked with, or, obviously I've had run-ins with, there's a part of them, whether they like it or not, that somehow wants to be liked. It's like, if this person will open up to me more if they like me or think that I'm a nice person or I'm open or I'm warm. The opposite really is true in break. The open, warm, soft therapist, it won't work in break method. And I think in general with certain client types, it doesn't work. Right? That client is more likely to find ways to work you in ways that delay the process of healing. So all of these processes are a part of preventing the client from finding an exit door, right? Like that is why we are so effective, is every door is blocked so that they effectively have to heal. And because of that, we have a 93% organic referral rate. So for us, that means that every client that finishes, 93% will actually refer their friends and family within the first 6 months after graduating.
Wow.
So most of our business, and we're like full on referrals, which is great, which is why I think I've been able to spend so much time training therapists to just, get this powerful tool in the hands of people all over the country and all over the world. We have some people doing this now in Egypt, South Africa, Australia. So we are definitely expanding globally, and I'd like to see more of that. I'm well aware that I can only do so much as an individual, and I think the times of me having 12 clients a day, they're very numbered, and I would much rather spend my time passing on the tools and the gift of break to the people that need it, want it, and it solves a lot of their problems. We were talking before we started the recording about practice burnout, and I think that is the primary thing that break will do for a therapist. Break method effectively solves all of the problems that cause burnout in your therapy practice. From the structure to the client results to the time frame. One of the things that break does that I think is very appropriate, especially for the results we're trying to get, is there is this condensed time frame, right? Where it's not like this can drag out for 1 year, 2 years. I always describe it in the therapy training as a slinky, right? So, like you can have a slinky that's pushed closed and all the little circles are nice and tight, or you can pull it out like this. None of the positioning of the circles change, right? Like if they were all A, B, C, D, right, they'd all be in the same order. In the therapy space, depending on the type of client, you can slightly move it out so it takes slightly longer, or you can keep it condensed as is. Depends obviously on your practice. We have somebody who works with very low income inner city clientele. And when she first took the break training, she went to the head of her group practice and said, "Hey, I really want to bring this to my clients. I want to switch all my clients to this. Can you give me every client that's stalled out?" Right? To start off with, like, let me prove this to you. Give me every client that's stalled out, that's not making progress, and I will turn their ship around. And she did that. And now she gets to pretty much exclusively do break method.
Wow.
So with her clients, the process can be a bit longer. She's got much more severe psychiatric conditions in her practice. And, you know, what for me in my practice might take an average of 20 weeks, for her might take more like 35 to 40 weeks. And that's okay. But we don't ever want it going past really that 8-month marker. If a client's going past 8 months, there's some breakdown in the process. So for most people, the average is 20 weeks to completion. So from the time you start to the time you're like, oh my God, who even am I? How did this happen? It's about 20 weeks. And we notice that clients, I think, as I mentioned, start to experience such drastic change early that they're experiencing rapid change throughout the process. There's particularly an arc between module 2 and module 3 where clients will often look at you and say, I don't really know how much more I could change. Like what else? What else is left?
Wow. Yeah.
And that's where the sustainability piece comes in, right? So we mentioned that obviously we care about being effective, we care about being efficient, right? We don't want to waste the client's time, we don't want to waste the therapist's time, right? We also want to make sure that whatever we're doing is sustainable, where they're not codependently attached to you. And unfortunately, via emotional codependence, but also financial codependence, the therapy model right now does build some of that, and there's really no way around it. Break method is built to do the exact opposite. It's meant for you as the therapist to help you see more clients more effectively with less burnout so that you're always challenged with new. And it's not that as a therapist, and I think let's call it like it is. I've seen thousands of clients in my career, and there are times that you get bored personally with seeing the same thing over and over again, correct? Like it's part of in any job where if you were doing something with repetition and there wasn't the introduction of new or challenge, just like working on an assembly line, eventually you'd become slightly dispassionate about what you're doing and feeling burnt out, like, oy vey, I got to do this again and again and again. With break method, the client graduation rate is so high because there's 98% of people will finish the program, which even that I feel like contrasted with therapy is pretty extreme. 98% of people will finish, 93% of people will bring you new clients without you having to go looking for other clients. So you're constantly getting challenged with new and different.
Right.
So you're able, because you're seeing a client for less time, you're able to often stay more engaged and you find more interest and passion in the cases that you're doing because it's not dragging on forever. And I mean, we can't deny that there's got to be a part for therapy, for therapists that feels missing when you don't get to get the dangling carrot at the end, right? Sometimes working with clients, if a client's not finishing or they're stalling out or they're taking a year, you as the therapist might not ever really be able to stop and celebrate all of your effort, right? Like, where are your wins? How do you quantify your wins? With break method as a therapist, just from am I being effective? Every session, you're walking like wanting to give yourself a pat on the back or high five, like, yes, we're crushing it. Because the evidence is there every session.
So so you said it's about around a 20-week program. Is that meeting with your clients like once a week?
So most therapists meet with their clients once a week. When you go through break with me, for example, or somebody that works on the corporate side, we have 2 different roles that are defined, and many of our therapists choose to use this structure for their clients as well. So we have the behavior strategy side, which is what I would do. So this is where you're actually doing the diagnostic sessions and then building the behavior strategy work. Then you have client support. Client support is more like the nurturing mama bear cheerleader, but also can be the harsh, tough love accountability that, in my opinion, should not ever have crossover with behavior strategy. And I think that's something that ends up leading sometimes to burnout in therapy, is that for me, I know what I'm most effective at. And if I have to waste 10 minutes of my session catching up on things that I might make the client feel more comfortable, or it's a story that they want to vent or offload, it's not a good use of my time. It's ultimately not going to be effective in their treatment. And I'd rather stay focused on the things that I know I'm really good at and that I can be very effective at. So creating this separation has, I think, been one of the keys to success for us with our clients, is that they know, they learn the rules of who to go to for what. And it allows the person on the behavior strategy side to be incredibly more effective with their job, because there's a rule. When you get on, you're ready to work. There's no distractions. There's no, oh, well, I just want to tell you about this fight that I had with my boyfriend. That
No.
doesn't happen.
So that's interesting. So you have the behavior, you call it behavior
Behavior
strategist.
strategy.
And then okay, and then you have like more of the coach on the side. That's
Exactly.
okay. Okay.
And
So
our therapists have access to the coaching side. So typically what will happen is, the way we run our program on the corporate side is, for me in behavior strategy, I would meet with the client 5 times.
okay.
So it's 5 half-hour long appointments. So if you even just think about that, it's not that much time to be as effective as we are. And client support, they have 5 structured calls, and then they have weekly check-ins. So the client's able to have some sort of like on-the-spot triage support through text or chat, and then they have 5 structured calls. So basically it's like week on with behavior strategy, week off with client support, week on, week off. And then they have support from client support in the in-between. We've found that in general, clients don't need as much support as they think they do. So one of the roles also of client support is to help the client realize when they're experiencing learned helplessness, and when they're leaning into the relationship for comfort, to play out their attachment issues, right? So our team is trained in saying, hey, I'm here for you. Let's stay focused on these things. Do you think there's a chance that you're using this session for XYZ? Let's look at it through the scope of your pattern. So often the client will see the error and how they're essentially misusing the appointment, and then they have a chance to correct it and say, you're right, I don't need the session. Okay, cool, bye, have a great day. So that's another thing that can be great for the behavior strategist, is that you don't ever have to be the bad guy. You don't have to be the one that's reflecting some of these things where the client is using or taking advantage or manipulating, right? You get to stay focused on, I'm the one that's going to help you see the problem and solve the problem, but I'm not the one that's going to step in the weeds of any of the other things that could make you turn on me or turn on the program. It allows a separation that keeps things very clean. And I think when we've had our therapists go through this, that's the part that they feel the most relieved by. It's like, oh
Oh
God,
yeah.
I have somebody to
Yeah.
support this side of it, and I don't have to do it. This
Well,
is
yeah,
great. I can just do the part that I'm so good at.
and I'm over here and I'm like, well, that sounds awesome because, as a therapist, like you said, you build a rapport, they start to trust you, they start to tell you all the things that are going on. And then when you start to maybe present, well, might be an attachment issues. Oh, no, no, no. And it's like this, you're like, no, I know what I'm talking about, but they're not ready to hear it. And all you have is this, your conversation to go on. You don't have like, well, let's look at your answers to these questions here. And here's the proof that no, this, so I can totally get on board with it, because if they know that they have an attachment issue, it's come up with the behavior strategist, but yet the coach is saying, hey, I think you might be doing this here. So what else
Yeah,
could we use this time for?
let's go back to
Yeah.
your document. Let's take a look
Yeah.
right here. What does this say that you do after this? Oh, well, I do this.
Right.
Do you think that what you're doing right now fits
Yeah.
into the scope of that
Yeah.
part of your pattern?
Yes. Oh
So
my gosh.
these are some of
This is
those
great.
moments that help the client face self-deception,
Yeah.
because they feel very aligned with the truth and what they're experiencing. But
Sure.
I think this is the key, is that our feelings are often not correlated to reality. And
Right. Right.
I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of where therapy has gone, particularly on social media, is very opposite of this idea, which is very much like, honor your feelings, whatever you feel is
Yeah.
real. It's not
Like,
true. And that's incredibly harmful, I
yeah.
think. It'll drive people nuts, I think.
No, I totally agree with you. I think what you're doing and how you're helping people is incredible. And I do hope this gets out there to more and more therapists, because I know that so many of us feel like there's something missing in our work. And we know, like, we see the presenting issue, we hear the client's life story, and we're like, no, this is the issue here. But the client will fight it on some level, or will point finger to something else or not want to take okay, so this happened to me, it's not my fault, it's still their fault. It's like, yeah, but it's your life, you have to decide what you want to do with it and how you want to move forward. We can't take away that experience, but we can take away or decide how do you want to show up in the world moving forward.
So I think this is where break is so effective. So break maps the brain pattern that started between ages 2 and 5. So if we start there, what we see is that that brain pattern is responsible for how you experience every event after that.
Okay.
So example would be there are certain brain pattern types that predispose you to be in victim-centric thinking. So what do you know? They're going to be the perpetual victim throughout their lives. With break method, that's why on that first session, once they get their print out, that's that predictive model of like, here, I bet this is what you do. You do this, this, and this. You probably like to do this, this, and this. Then they're like,
Right.
well, yeah, that is exactly me. How is that possible? So from that point forward, it's like you've already got their attention because in one fell swoop, you've got their number.
Yeah.
Right. So it's in anything after that that they want to try to deny. It's like, well, but they've literally got it. They've got it on this piece of paper and it's shared with me. And I'm encouraged as the client to like really understand it, to dig deep in it. Break method is there's a client-facing side of this as well, because I think it's very important that the client understands all the concepts that the behavior strategist does, right? This is part of what makes it ultimately sustainable. The client has their 5 diagnostic sessions that are anchored. In between those sessions, they have a series of videos that are anywhere between 25 minutes and an hour. And they have homework. They have to extract the data, they have to move the data around, and they have to understand the concept. And then they have to be able to observe that concept in day-to-day life. So this process of observing in day-to-day life, we call field work, where it's like, okay, you see this on the page. We've proven this extensively. We're good here. Okay. Now you understand this concept. This week, I want you to go actually out in the field and see how often you're picking up on this. And they actually have to take notes. So they're essentially turning their lives into a scientific method experiment where they're like, oh my God, you're right. I do this all the time. Where it's like they didn't see it until they saw it. And now they can't unsee it. And that's what feedback we get the most in break is that you can't unsee the things that you see in break.
Sure.
So you are a fundamentally different person after that.
Wow.
So when we look at what you were talking about, and for what it's worth, we work with kids. I have a gigantic part of my practice that's all working with families and kids. And I do think that one of the things break does best is it helps the client change and then become aware of the ways that they're perpetuating these cycles with their kids. And that's personally, as a mom of 4, that's the thing that I'm most personally invested in is being a generational chain breaker. There is a way for us to be more strategic in how we're parenting and to not allow some of these brain patterns to develop because they lead to low quality of life. We have this, we call it the brain pattern spectrum, again, where you can kind of plot out these 5 different brain pattern types. And there's certain places on the spectrum that have a really low reported quality of life. And unfortunately, and this is the crazy part, some of the inputs that are most correlated with those negative outputs are parents that are overly coddling, that create this learned helplessness where the parents meeting every need, they're creating anxious attachment style. And we've found and proven time and time again that, believe it or not, attachment parenting creates anxious attachment, which that's a whole can of worms. And I think it's a can of worms that I'm preparing to go in on social media over the next month. But this idea that anytime your child has a need, it's your duty to meet every single need and to not create any separation, that is setting your kid up for the most epic failure of all time. They won't learn any self-efficacy. They won't learn how to self-regulate. And in turn, you're creating anxious attachment because then when you do finally have to separate for some reason, they won't know how to. They didn't learn at the ages when it would have been appropriate, and then it becomes harder and harder and harder. So one of the things we do focus on in break method is that generational piece and putting some loving responsibility on our clients. Like, hey, if you have kids, it's time to do better. Now you're going to know better. Now you've got to do better. And actually the entire 3rd module is predominantly focused on things like parenting. And we do also have something called the Parenting Club where we build behavior strategy just for families that are having some pretty severe behavior issues in the home. And break method is effective for all of it. A kid can take the brain pattern assessment, an 80-year-old can take the brain pattern assessment.
Yeah.
And once you understand what your child's brain pattern type is, all of the rest of it becomes very easy because we know exactly what inputs not to give and at what times and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm really curious. I mean, I'm like, sign me up for the break method. I wanna I wanna be a part of it. I wanna learn it. Um, Busy, I'm just so excited for what you're doing and how many people that you're helping. It's really cool. I love it. If people want to learn more, I know you said your next cohort like starts tomorrow, and this episode probably won't come out until after that starts, of course. But so how often do you do trainings? How can people learn
So
more?
we do our trainings for mental health professionals twice a year. So this one starts tomorrow. With exception if there are people that want to jump in relatively quickly, as long as it's within the month of April, you'd still be able to catch up. The
Okay.
graduation date, just to put it in perspective, is June, the second week of June.
Oh,
So we do have obviously 2 graduations a year. So there are times that life gets in the way and people push back to graduate with the next cohort. We're definitely flexible on that. So typically our start dates are going to be April and October. So
okay.
the October dates, we always do a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday training. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday training in October, I believe, is the second week. We always try to go second week. So I'll make sure that you guys have all the dates, and you
Okay.
can just go to breakmethod.com and then you can click on certifications, and then you would do the ones for therapists.
Okay. And this is all virtual, right?
Their graduation is required on
Okay.
in person. So
Okay.
everything else is virtual. So the entire 4 months can be virtual, but the graduation you have to be on site at our headquarters in Sandpoint, Idaho.
Oh, Idaho. Nice.
Mm-hmm.
My
So
husband
yeah,
was just
for that training,
beautiful.
you'd fly into Spokane, and it's about a 70-minute drive from the airport. So obviously, because there's the online video component,
Mhm.
what ends up happening with therapists is that the therapists essentially are licensing our model so that all of their clients get their own portal that's all
Okay.
branded for you. And they would watch the videos and do the order, and they would just book all of their appointments with you.
Yeah.
And, just like with social media landscape where it's like, you've got a minute and 40 seconds to get someone's attention,
Mhm.
most people feel that they can stay in a mode that's participative for 30 minutes. Like, okay, if it's only 30 minutes, I can stay actively engaged the whole time, and they typically do. And
Yeah.
every single call is, again, highly structured. So there's never an open-ended call for behavior strategy. You always know exactly what you have to do, what information you've got to gather, and how you're using that for the diagnostic process.
Okay. Makes sense. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you would like our audience to know?
I gotta say, I've been in the mental health landscape for a while. I've spoken on a lot of stages and been able to do a lot of podcast touring and things like that. And I will say that whenever somebody thinks, oh, this is like that, and then they actually come into break method, they're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I was wrong. This is not like that at all. So my word of encouragement is reach out to us, book a practice advisor call, talk to somebody on our team. It's likely not like anything else out there. We didn't talk so much about the origin story, but break method, it's a potent, I think, ahead of its time
Mhm.
methodology. And someone on our team who now actually has become an investor, we moved the company into a new company because we're actually working on some wearable tech app pieces that go with break method, which we're a year in, and I think we'll be launching in November, which is really exciting. But we just did an interview for Bloomberg TV. We were actually selected as the world's greatest mental health company this year.
Oh, wow.
And
Congratulations.
he
Cool.
says it better than I ever could. This guy is someone who's, PhD like 3 times over with so much under his belt. His words on the interview were, in my opinion, there's never truly been a quantum leap in the mental health field. And he references a variety of reasons why he believes that break method is the quantum leap. And I agree. So whatever you think this is like, go into it with a completely open perspective and prepare to be amazed.
Yeah. Well, I'm amazed and I'm excited. And I know you're going to help so many people. And you're just starting, like you're just on the cusp of, and I'm excited for the new wave of mental health because it's needed. It is so
I agree.
needed. I definitely am excited. Well, thanks again for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And feel free to reach out to me. I always answer all my DMs on Instagram. So I'm an open book. Would love to connect with each and every one of you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed my conversation with Bizzie. I know I sure did, and I learned a ton. I want to remind you that you can get 30% off of the Break Method training program. Just go to the link in the show notes, and at checkout, you want to apply the code Lisa Podcast. That's all one word, Lisa Podcast at checkout. Please note that the therapy show with Lisa Mustard is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and not a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your therapist, doctor, or physician before implementing any suggestions from the show. The therapy show with Lisa Mustard is edited and engineered by Chelsea Weaver. If you're looking to start a podcast or ready to take the editing off of your plate, be sure to visit chelseaweaverpodcasting.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.